Coming up next.
Many people get into the digital space ignorantly. And the way the world has presented it, the social media companies and other tech companies, the way they presented it as a mechanism by which to connect people. But really, it is a mechanism to collect information.
Hi there and welcome to this podcast. I am Andrea Locker.
And I'm Diana Ayo. Thanks for tuning in. On the Afro Tech Talk podcast, we speak to tech experts, individuals in the tech space, as well as young people about the latest trends and innovations in Africa to explore how tech is transforming their society. We filter our guests' profound insights into actionable guidance, empowering listeners to find inspiration and actively participate in the ongoing tech revolution.
If you are new to the show or would want to recommend our podcast to your friends and family, our starter packs are a great place for you to get hooked. We understand that it can be a bit hard to get started, so for this, we have our episodes segmented into different topics that will have you started right away. Visit afrotechtalk.africa.
In a 3-part series on privacy, we speak to Geoffrey Okao, a key player in tech with several years of experience in the digital space. We'll be diving deep into the concept of privacy in today's digital world.
Welcome, Geoffrey. Welcome to the podcast. So, could you just, let us have a brief introduction of who you are and maybe what you do, if that's okay.
So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm very passionate about digital in Africa. I consider myself a serial technologist, started in computing in 1983 when I was 16, 17 years old on Wang mainframe computers. Wang is now a defunct company, but then they were very serious. And the first IBM XT PCs while I was in secondary school at Starehe in Nairobi. I also did some work for the Bank of Uganda, building their enterprise networks and the bank-wide network that connected the different currency centers in Uganda. So that was in the mid-90s. And then I joined the UN in Kampala to begin building some deep field, high latency resistance comms for the Great Lakes region. That was Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, DRC. And that was in the mid to late 90s. After which I then left the region and since then has been doing many other things for the UN. Right now, I'm managing global IT systems on the governance and the strategy side. That's basically a summary of my journey.
Okay, thank you so much. So because today we'll be handling privacy, what do you think privacy is, and has this definition really changed over time?
So privacy is a big thing. And the definition of privacy is, it's out there, it's a right to be left alone, or freedom from interference or intrusion. It's a fundamental right to essential autonomy, the protection of human dignity. It's all those things, but it is a human right to privacy, because privacy really is at the essence of our well-being, and the notion that somebody who is very keen to be private has something to hide. It's true, but the thing that we have to hide does not necessarily have to be a bad thing. For example, we all wear clothes when we are leaving the house. It's not because you obviously have something to hide, which is why you wear clothes. You also don't disclose your bank account details at random because those things are private, and there's nothing wrong with seeking to have privacy. So that's the thing about privacy. In my view, it is essential, and it has evolved over time in a sense because it has become digitalized. And once information is digital, then it gets complicated to protect. It becomes easy to disclose. It becomes easy to devolve, and then it becomes much more difficult to manage than, for example, something that that is in your head. that you haven't disclosed to somebody, that you manage yourself and you manage who it is that you disclose it. But the same way that the moment you disclose it to somebody, you've lost control over it, is the same way that once you have digitized information, you've pretty much lost control of it.
Oh, thank you so much, Geoff, for that detailed insight. I would also like to know, what is the traditional definition of privacy, especially in the African context, and how does it apply in today's interconnected world?
I think the traditional definition doesn't change from what I have just given, which is the right to be left alone, a fundamental right to autonomy, to basically just being able to do your own thing without intrusion. So I think that really hasn't changed. However, in today's interconnected world, that changes because many people get into the digital space ignorantly. And the way the world has presented it, the social media companies and other tech companies, the way they presented it as a mechanism by which to connect people. But really, it is a mechanism to collect information, as much as possible. And because people are not very aware of these things, they devolve a lot more information than perhaps they should, you see. So privacy can a lot easier be compromised the moment that information is devolved or divulged. And then it becomes way more difficult to protect. So in today's interconnected world, it means that a privacy compromise can escalate very quickly out of control of the individual, and even out of the control of the legal or sovereign jurisdiction where the person lives, because information can cross borders. Information doesn't care that you live in Uganda or you live in Mozambique. It doesn't care. It flows, as it's been made to flow, and it could result in harm that is far greater than this person anticipated. So in today's world, the risk to the individual of loss of privacy is existential. I mean, it's difficult to describe the potential impact that it could have on the individual.
So recently, throughout actually every social media person can testify to this, whereby there are links that are shared, on different WhatsApp groups and Telegram as well, which is always asking them to join some kind of, maybe a job advert. And the way it's always, presented, it looks so legit. So they could maybe say, let's say maybe the government of Kenya is maybe hiring, people for this, or else there's some money being given out. So I know at some point we're going to talk about how we can actually, protect ourselves better. Should we be concerned about such links being shared?
This is the thing about privacy. It's down to the individual who has that information to decide whether or not to divulge it, and there is almost no one right answer, because then the level of risk or the appetite for risk is based on the individual's assessment. But generally speaking, any information that you can't put out there, that you don't want to announce in the market, you shouldn't be putting it out in spaces where where multiple people are involved, because it can be taken out of context, it can be misunderstood. I mean, those of you who have wives and husbands, it's just easier to have a conversation, because sending even a text message or something like that, it can easily be misconstrued or misunderstood. Yet it has been so that the digital element around the transmission of information does not transmit the spirit or the intent of the comms. It just transmits that text, and that's why emojis have come up to kind of try and to add color to the text, so that it kind of gives somebody the semblance of intent. But largely that doesn't go with the text. It just goes as text, and then now the person receiving it receives it and interprets it based on either historical information or what they consider to be the tone of the conversation or the past relationships, etc., etc. But all of those things are very, very nuanced. and difficult to lock down. So it is not easy to kind of stipulate, whether or not somebody should do this. People should just be made aware of what the risks are, and then let them evaluate their appetite for risk, and the potential impact, and then decide on what they want to say or not say.
Okay, and when we look at tech and privacy, how has tech transformed the way we perceive and experience privacy?
Now, this one is, so first of all, it's very geography and digital awareness dependent. So, so the baby boomers in the US, for example, are now in their late 60s, 70s, and they are a prime target for online scammers, because online scammers find them on Facebook. They're probably lonely. They've lost their spouse, and then start telling them how much they love them, etc., and extract a lot of money out of them. So it's digital awareness dependent. It is geography dependent. This current generation, trust. I mean, the baby boomers, trust was the norm. So anybody who says that I am this on the internet, they just believe that they are that. But we know that is no longer the case. I mean, I have a good friend of mine who met his wife online, and this was in the early 2000s. I mean, and she was from the Philippines, and he's from somewhere else, and they met, they got married, and so on and so on. Those things used to happen even those days, but the degree of trust then was way higher than it is today, because the internet has now been used to a lot of other things. So the way we perceive privacy and experience today is very dependent on where we are generationally. It's very dependent on where we are geographically, and more primarily, the extent to which we are aware of what technology can do to us from a loss of privacy perspective. Technology has made it easier to lose privacy. It has made it more difficult to manage privacy, because the moment it gets out of your hands, that's it. It has made it much easier to disseminate information. It has also made it much more difficult to protect that information. So if somebody is given that awareness, then let them evaluate the extent to which they want to, engage with tech with regard to private information. And then that way you can hopefully get, a lot more, a generation that is more responsible towards the handling of their private information.
We've had a lot of misconceptions, and so many people out there tend to input their information. Sometimes people say they have nothing to hide, so, they can freely or easily share their information. Others believe they've done nothing wrong, so they can put their information out there. We freely put in our passwords, especially when it comes to, say, promotions and all those other things. Even when it comes to the bank, sometimes someone believes because they don't have money on their bank accounts, they can freely or easily put the bank details out there. So what are some of those misconceptions, about privacy?
That's a very good question, Diana, because what you pointed out is a problem that is down to ignorance. Because I remember the chairman of Google said, if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried about your privacy. And then the next day they published his emails online. He was livid. So why was that? He was being a hypocrite, because the truth of the matter is that whether you have something to hide or not, we have things which are private. They have nothing to do with the fact that you're doing something wrong. And like I said at the beginning, we all get out of our houses with our clothes on because we have something to hide. And it's not because it is bad, it's because it's private, you see. And that's the distinction that we need to make. And because many people think, oh, if, like you said, if I have no money in the bank, so I really don't care. Wait a minute. What if somebody steals your personal information and goes and opens another bank account with that, and then maybe gets a loan from a title deed that they had stolen in a certain way, and then now suddenly they walk away with the money, then you have to pay, So suddenly it becomes something that you need to be concerned about. Or, somebody steals your SIM card, which has or your private details, and then goes and gets a SIM card, whichever way they do it, and now is able to make incriminating phone calls or send messages, and then who does the government come after you? They come after you. So it becomes a problem, you see. So in this digital age, it is important that that these misconceptions are eradicated, and they're eradicated by education. So, for example, this podcast that you guys are making, this is one of the mechanisms by which people can be educated. But I think it should be probably more widespread. For example, on FM radio, on all of that. It should.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned a very important point earlier on, whereby you said, if there's some information that you wouldn't want it to go out there, then you probably shouldn't. Yeah. So is there a way we could maybe guarantee in a way where we can say this aspect of our lives is maybe private? Is there any mechanism around how we can, get to segment which parts of our lives are private and which ones are not?
So first of all, I'm assuming that you're referring to information that has been digitized, because if it's been digitized, then it's no longer in your control. But if you have it in your head, yes, then you can keep it in your head. You don't divulge it to anybody, and it's yours. But the moment it has been digitized, you've lost control of it. And people will say, "Oh, well, you see, I have it in private USB stick." Okay, true. It's just a matter of time, because you might plug that USB stick in some computer and something steals it, or yeah. So there's all kinds of things that can happen to it. So the moment you have digitized information, it becomes you've lost control of it. The only assertion that you can have that information that you have is private is that you have it within your control. So let's say you have a medical record from a diagnosis that came from the hospital, and it is written on paper. You see, so now you take that paper and you file it away in a file that is in your house. That information is largely private. You see, the moment it is digitized, then now it becomes complicated, because now the hospital has to find a way of protecting it in a certain way. And then it should maybe be accessed by certain doctors, but maybe by not different types of doctors, or the nurse can only access a certain part of the record, maybe not another part. You see, it just gets complicated to do. So that's a tricky one, and because the world is all going digital, privacy is becoming the single biggest thing, as information security, because that's all around the privacy and the protection of information. That's becoming a big thing for governments. It's becoming a big thing because governments, of course, hold a lot of private information for their citizens, for example. That's a big thing for them, because even they have to protect that information, not just from the loss of it, or from inadvertent disclosure. They have to protect it from other government people who may not need access to it for all. It's complicated. That's all I can say. But yeah, if information has been digitized, then it becomes difficult to protect.
Thank you, Geoffrey. I would also love to know, what are some of the challenges that digital privacy faces, especially in the modern day era?
So first of all, you want to know what information exists digitally and where it is, which relates to you, because then you can't protect what you don't know, or what you don't know where it exists. So
Yeah.
so that's the first thing. And secondly, once private records have been digitized, they have to be stored. They have to be protected from things like inadvertent access, or unauthorized access, unauthorized modifications, unauthorized transmission. You remember when the ID project first came, many people got their IDs with the wrong name, in some cases with the wrong picture. How did that happen? So there's that. It may seem easy, but it's actually not that easy. Protecting information at a granular level requires systems that are built to do that. It requires governance practices and artifacts which are beyond technology to do that. And those kind of systems tend to be expensive and complex, and dependent on expertise that may not exist, or is difficult to find, or is dependent on a few individuals. So then you find that the whole the stack of challenges kind of just keeps building the moment you've digitized the information, you see, which, like I said, for the first example that I gave concerning the diagnosis, you would not have that. You just have it in a file in a drawer somewhere. Maybe you've locked it, and it's only you and your wife that know about it. That's it, you know. But the moment it's been digitized, then that whole stack of, how does a change to it be managed? Who has access to it? How is it being stored in case it gets lost? Can it be recovered? And how else could this system that is built to do this, how else can it behave to perhaps disclose this information inadvertently? So all those are challenges that begin to kind of pile up. And in this modern era, it's getting more and more difficult.
All right. Similarly, I have seen online, especially when you go to fill certain forms or you're completing certain documents online, there's usually a consent. Say that there's privacy consent, they click on this and, consent and things like that. So what role does consent play in this context of online privacy? And how do we navigate it effectively?
That's also an excellent question. So consent is fundamental in any privacy situation, not just online. So, for example, when a pickpocket steals your wallet, they did not ask for consent, okay, but your wallet is gone. Now, if they came and asked, hey, can I have your wallet? You have the option of saying, yes, you can, or no, you can't. You see, so in the context you just said, where you go online and then they say, oh, you have to click this button to go forward, you almost don't have a choice, because if you want to consume that service, you have to consent to their privacy policy. And whether you agree with it or not, if you don't agree, then you don't consume that service. That's really how it is. Even if it's something that perhaps you need to say, for example, you're going to apply for a visa, and then they ask, all the questions that they ask, and they say, okay, so you consent to how we're going to use this information. If you don't consent to it, then yeah, forget it. They won't give you the visa. But now, if you consent to it, now you've basically given up your rights to that information, and now they can do with it what it is that they have established in their privacy policy, or their degree of morality, because in some cases the privacy policy says this, that's the policy, but at the back they're doing something completely different because maybe there's nobody to check. You see, so consent is fundamental, but at the same time, that you have given consent does not guarantee you that privacy will be preserved, because you are now dependent on the mechanisms that whoever you've given consent to is going to use to protect it, and the degree of morality that they have towards that.
So just to follow up on that question that Diana asked, lately there's been, growth in the tech field throughout the world, actually. And just as you actually said it, there's a way, if you don't consent to some of these terms and conditions that they give, you don't get to have access to whatever to whatever platform or whatever service they get to offer you. So does the collection and sharing of this data by these company affect our understanding of our personal privacy?
You do have a right to offer you the services based on your agreement to their terms. And this is even in the physical, because in the physical, when you walk into, for example, a restaurant, they say, we reserve the right of admission. That is basically consent. So by you walking in there, they have the right to kick you out, and that's okay, because they reserve that. So that also happens in the analog world, as it were. So, but if you're going to consume a service, and this is becoming more and more prevalent, just be ready to give up your degree of privacy. There are many services that you can consume without providing too much detail, because maybe the area where they operate from has regulation that requires them to only collect the information that they need to be able to give you the service. For example, when I logged into Riverside, they asked for my name. They didn't ask for my date of birth, because they don't need my date of birth to deliver the service, you see. Or they didn't ask for, where I live and so on and so on. So there are those who have tailored their collection of information to the degree that they need to be able to deliver the service. But that's dependent on two things. It's dependent on the morality of the company and dependent on the regulation that governs, what they're doing. Now, where there is no governance, or where the enforcement is non-existent or very trivial, then you can do what you want, you see. So it's important that the person be educated enough to know, okay, so do I really want to do this? Can I do without this service because the degree to which I'm giving up my privacy is unacceptable? And yeah, then you make the decision at that point. Some of us left WhatsApp because we didn't agree with the privacy policy that they had. And that's okay. But just be prepared to not consume that service. Because you did not agree with their terms and conditions.
That was our conversation with Geoffrey Okao from Afrotech Talk. This is the first part of our 3-part series on privacy. Stay tuned for the second part.
And just in case you have not yet subscribed to this podcast, please do subscribe, like, share, and follow on the different platforms.
This podcast is hosted and directed by Andrew and Diana, edited and produced by Marifosasa Studios for Afrotech Talk.